Hi everybody and welcome to the Saturday edition, the Breeders' Cup Saturday edition of Out of the Gate. I'm Dan Illman. Thanks so much for watching. Let's take a look at what's on tap. DRF handicapper Mike Beer and I will take a look at all of the Breeders' Cup races on the Saturday card at Del Mar. Plus, we will have on-site reports from Mike Welsh with the Breeders' Cup Daily Clocker Report. Matt Bernier will take a look at the Breeders' Cup Mile and the Breeders' Cup Classic. We'll have Craig Milkowski's TimeformUS Spotlight. JK's Play of the Day features a Saturday Pick 4, and Nicole Russo's Pedigree Pick takes a peek at the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. There's a lot to cover on Breeders' Cup Saturday, so let's break out of the gate. Let's take a look at the field for the first Breeders' Cup race on Saturday afternoon at Del Mar. It is the Grade 1 $2 million Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, and our coverage is presented by Into Mischief at Spendthrift Farm. Mike Beer, we're going to take a look at the winners of the three major prep races for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. And I want to remind everybody, for expanded stakes previews of all the Breeders' Cup races, we touch upon every horse in each Breeders' Cup race. Head on over to video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Let's begin with your neck of the woods, Mike. That's Belmont, the Grade 1 Frisette, a one-turn prep. They swing into the stretch, and Separation of Powers has taken over the lead.
Yeah, I mean, she ran very well in this race. She kept up with the pace early. You see her there. She was chasing those two horses in front of her from basically a long way out in this race. You will see those two horses, two were inside, Perfect Miss, Strategic Miss. They will stop in the stretcher. They get very tired. Separation of Powers does not get tired. She takes over at the 8th pole and is clear. Caledonia Road, the horse who runs second, I think a pretty good second, can't catch Separation of Powers. She did a lot of running around the turn in this race, though.
This will be the two-turn debut for both Separation of Powers and Caledonia Road, and Maya Malibu, for that matter. The top two have tough outside post positions in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. I think you make a very good point about Caledonia Road. That was a long mid-race move down towards the inside. She kept on in the stretch. Maybe she has some upside at a price. You're going to go with the horse, however, that won the prep at Keeneland. That's Heavenly Love.
Yeah, Heavenly Love exits the Grade 1 Alcibiades at Keeneland. I like her chances in this race. I like that she has an inside post, first of all. And I liked her Alcibiades. We can look at that race right now. I think you and I disagree on this race a little bit, Dan. I like it more than you do. Not only do I like her performance, soft trip or not, I like the performance of the runner-up as well, Princess Warrior. So these are my two horses in this race. Heavenly Love, easy trip or not in this race. I like the way she finishes it off. She's running through the wire in this race. And I actually liked her first two starts of her career as well. So I just think she has a lot of ability, and I'm hoping she gets the right trip in this race.
I love the way she did it. My own knock on this race is it came back real slow. From a buyer standpoint, from a clock standpoint. It was slower than Geo Game, who's in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. She won a maiden special weight at that mile and a 16th distance that same day at Keeneland, faster than the Alcibiades. But again, I did like the way Heavenly Love finished up that race. I'm going with the likely favorite in here. We're going to go back to the Chandelier Stakes at Santa Anita and take a look at the undefeated West Coast hope, Moonshine Memories. She's not Songbird, she's not Beholder, she's not flashy. She just shows up, gets good trips, and gets the job done. Here she is taking over the lead from second-time starter Alluring Star, who is the pace setter and favorite in this race, and she goes about her business to a professional victory. That's Piedi Bianchi, who might benefit from a fast pace in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, running evenly for third. But Moonshine Memories is just an extremely solid horse, and again, she gets these kind of good trips. Alluring Star is going to show the pace. Moonshine Memories will be sitting just off. I think Moonshine Memories can make it 4 for 4, and if she wins the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, it's on to an Eclipse Award. Nicole Russo's Pedigree Pick segment focuses on the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Then we'll have Mike Welsh on site with his Breeders' Cup Daily Clocker Report. Let's go to those segments right now.
Hi everyone, Nicole Russo coming to you for Out of the Gates Breeders' Cup Saturday edition, and I've been taking a look at the Breeders' Cup's 2-year-old events. Of course, pedigree can be very much a factor in these, as you have young horses still developing, stretching out to longer distances, and in some cases making a surface switch. Let's take a look at the field for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Our coverage of this race sponsored by Spendthrift Stallions, an event that will likely lock up an Eclipse Award in the division for the winner, and it also typically anoints the winner book favorite for the Kentucky Derby. 3 Grade 1 winners in the race in Bolt d'Oro, Free Drop Billy, and Firenze Fire. Let's take a closer look at that trio. We'll begin with the morning line favorite, Bolt d'Oro. Won his first 2 starts at host track Del Mar, including a grade 1 tally, then stretched out to church 2 turns successfully in the front runner stakes and dominated the field. He's by Medaglia d'Oro, who can certainly get you a route horse, the sire of a pair of Kentucky Oaks winners, including Hall of Famer Rachel Alexandra in that Philly Classic. Also the sire of 2-time champion Songbird. Bolt d'Oro is out of an AP Indy mare. Of course, that great sire, a stamina influence. The mare was a winner at a mile and has also produced Sonic Mule, a stakes winner at a mile. Some more speed in the family farther back, including grade 1 winning sprinter Sensational. But at least in his immediate pedigree, Bolt d'Oro well equipped for at least this 1.16 middle distance. If one of the other favorites is going to upset Bolt d'Oro, I think it'll be Free Drop Billy, winner of the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland in his most recent outing. He's by Belmont Stakes winner Union Rags, who is also a grade 1 winning juvenile. Has already sired several grade 1 winning juveniles, as well as Breeders' Cup Distaff contender Paradise Woods and Belmont 3rd place finisher Patch. His foals look like him, strapping impressive horses with a ton of chrome, and they run like him. Free Drop Billy also has a ton of distance ability in his female family, although that's on turf. His grade 3 place dam also produced Group 1 winner Hawkbill, who took the Coral Eclipse. If this were Free Drop Billy's first try on dirt, I'd maybe raise that as a factor, but since he's shown he can run on dirt, just accept that stamina influence and move on. Now, if one of those 3 grade 1 winners is vulnerable, I do think it's Firenze Fire. He did go a mile in winning the grade 1 Champagne at Belmont, but on that sweeping oval, that's a 1-turn mile, and adding that second turn is a different mental game for these young horses. He's from the first crop of Poseidon's Warrior, a grade 1 winning sprinter by champion sprinter Speightstown. His dam never won. His second dam posted her only win at 7 furlongs as a juvenile. Now, his second dam is a full sister to Oatsy, of course, the dam of Preakness winner Shackelford and Alabama winner Lady Joni, among others. So some classic influences back there, but closer up, I do think you have to notice some vulnerabilities in Firenze Fire's pedigree. We've got a great team on the ground at Del Mar this week. Be sure to follow all of them on Twitter for up-to-the-minute updates on the juvenile and other races. As Mike Walsh will tell you in a minute, they'll tell you how all of these contenders look on the track training, get solid reviews for all 3 colts mentioned above, and keep an eye on my Twitter account at DRF Russo for more pedigree news and notes on the event. Thanks for watching and enjoy Breeders' Cup weekend.
Time again for the Daily Racing Form Breeders' Cup Clocker Report, brought to you by Naira Bets. You can be eligible for a $1,000 sign-up bonus. Go to nairabets.com for all the details, and you better sign up quickly. We're getting closer and closer to Breeders' Cup 2017, and the 2 stars, or all the stars, are on the grounds right now. Everybody's here. We still have not seen the Aidan O'Brien horses. They remained in quarantine today. They'll get their first chance to step out over the racetrack on Thursday. But the 2 big names, Gunrunner and Arrogate, were both out this morning, only a few minutes apart before dawn in the dark. Gunrunner, the first of the 2 to go, a routine gallop, looked terrific again. Obviously, he's coming up. We've talked about this now for several days. He's coming up to the race in top form, and so too is Arrogate. Didn't do much today, coming off his work on Monday, his travel day yesterday. He just jogged alongside the stable pony once around before going back to the barn, and we expect to see him gallop tomorrow. One of the other big names on the card Saturday, Unique Bella. She's going to be the favorite in the filly and mare sprint. She looked terrific this morning. She went and visited the starting gate, schooled a little bit there, and then once she came out of the gate, or out of the chute from the gate, she was just full of run, full of herself, gave her rider all she could handle, was 2-minute licking all the way back around to the half-mile pole before finally pulling up. So Unique Bella obviously on her toes and ready for Saturday's filly and mare sprint. A few horses blew out today on the turf. The Euros, James Garfield and Matar, both for the juvenile turf. James Garfield doing a little more, half mile in 52 and 2. Did it easy, though, was under a hold at the wire. Like the way he switched leads at the top of the stretch. We mentioned yesterday, not all the Euros will do that here. Matar went away from the 3 ace pole at a 2-minute lick and then blew out down the lane. I had him in 25 and 1, but he was on his left lead. Actually, the best work I saw on the turf today was a non-Breeders' Cup starter, but it is a horse who's going to run here over the weekend. That's Sound and Silent in the Juvenile Fillies turf on Saturday. Blew out down the stretch, also on the left lead, but showed big speed, 23 and 1 from the top of the lane to the wire. Only one worker on the main track this morning. That was Sky Diamond blowing out for the filly and mare sprint. I had her 25 and 3 from the quarter pole to the wire. Continued out nicely. Was easing up at the end. Still went in 38 and 3, and she's looked good since I've seen her here this past week. Now, we talked yesterday about Ulysses getting a little warm, as did Home and the Brave. I said we keep an eye on them. Well, Ulysses, no such problems today. He looked absolutely fantastic out on the turf course today. Not only went around once, he went around a second time for good measure. 2 spins around the 7.5 furlong course, and Ulysses looking good coming up to his role as the likely favorite in the turf. Queen's Trust also out this morning. She looked well also, striding nicely over the turf course. She's the defending filly and mare turf champion, and she had her ears up and looked happy as she went around there today now that she's gotten to test the course a little bit. A big improvement today. A couple of Euros who did not look so happy this morning were Kotai Glory for the turf sprint and Fatal Bear for the juvenile fillies turf. Both got very warm. Both got kind of ranked. The temperatures moderated a little bit today compared to the last few mornings, but both got pretty hot this morning. And again, we'll keep an eye on them, see if that tempers down as they get used to the place over the next couple of mornings. I thought Sadler's Joy also got a little warm this morning, but not to worry. He looked terrific, too. He was full of himself. A nice, energetic gallop here. That's 2 days in a row for Sadler's Joy. And he looks like he's coming in on top of his game. I think he could be a factor in the turf. Again, second morning in a row, I loved what I saw from Zelzal and Wahida. Zelzal, very strong again, open galloping, does a little canter from about the 8th pole around to the 3/8 pole. The riders pick up their stirrups at that point, and then she was allowed to really set sail, full of energy. I had her 2-minute licking from the 3/8 pole through the wire and out into the turn. Zelzal coming into the filly and mare turf. The waters are deep, but she looks like she's doing very well, as is Wahida. Zelzal's the mile. Wahida's a filly and mare turf. Had a big work yesterday, bounced right back today with another strong gallop, neck bowed over the turf course. Wahida looking very good. Lady Aurelia was the last Breeders' Cup horse to train this morning. Waited till everybody was done, get out on the course by herself, and then just jogged on the outside fence, or actually canted on the outside fence going clockwise. She's been in England a lot. 5 of her 7 starts have been in England, so she went England European style this morning, clockwise, looking solid going over the turf. A couple other horses just to make some quick observations. Blonde Bomber, the juvenile filly out of Florida. Looked like every time I looked up, she was coming by the wire. She must have gone at least 2 miles this morning, and was feeling just as well the second time around as the first. Wanda Gadot gave her rider all she could handle. She's going to run in the juvenile turf. She was full of energy, full of vim and vigor this morning on the muscle. She has the stride, at least in the morning. She looks like a turf horse with those big high strides, and she's been running on turf and poly, but she will be on the main track for the first time in the juvenile turf. Barra Gold, I thought, looked good today, coming in from New York, a big long shot in the filly and mare sprint. Bolt Dioro and Free Drop Billy, the 2 likely favorites in the juvenile, both had good mornings. I thought Bolt Dioro, first day I got to see him, looked very well this morning. So setting the stage now, we're getting closer and closer. We'll have a couple of more reports here, a couple of more clocker reports. You can also get all the full information, all the workouts here in New York, in California, Santa Anita, and even over some at Keeneland that we got off of the video that people were kind enough to do from Keeneland. And that clocker report, the Friday card will be available this evening. The Saturday card will be available Thursday night, and you can sign up for that at DRF.com. And like I said, just stay right here at DRF.com for the best coverage anywhere. Breeders' Cup 2017.
Let's throw up the field for the Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. 5 furlongs, $1 million is the purse. It's a big and bulky field. For expanded stakes previews, we talk about every horse in each Breeders' Cup race in detail. Visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We will get to the morning line favorite, the popular number 3, Lady Aurelia, in a moment. But Christophe Clement has 2 horses in this race, Mike Beer. The number 12, Pure Sensation, a true 5 furlong specialist, and a horse that's a little bit of a question mark at 5 furlongs. That's Disco Partner. Take us through Disco Partner's most recent race at Belmont, going 6. A good prep.
Yeah, this was a really nice prep. This is his turn back the last time. They stretched him out to a mile for his prior couple starts. He did fine, but he's not really a router. He's a sprinter. This was his turn back, and I agree with you. I think this is a perfect prep for this horse. They rated him back, produced him at the top of the stretch in the clear. This is what's known as winning under strong handling. That he just closes this field down. He's a really good horse. He's a closing sprinter, but he doesn't have to be far back. His connections after this race, they decided to pay the supplemental fee to get him into the Breeders' Cup. I think they made the right decision because he can win this race.
He really hasn't run any bad races in 2017. Really, the 4-star Dave handicap, he had the built-in excuse of a boggy turf course. The question is, will he get the 5? And another question is, what kind of trip does he work out from this inside post? Because as you said, he's a closing sprinter. There's a chance there'll be a lot of traffic in front of him.
Yeah, he could run into some traffic in here. He should have plenty of pace to run out there. They're going to go 5 furlongs on their turf here. There are plenty of fast horses. They're supposed to be speeding up front in this race. That helps this horse.
But they're all going to have to beat the ladies in this race, Lady Aurelia and Marcia, and they threw it down when they faced each other overseas in Europe, Mike. Let's take them through the stretch right now of that race. Lady Aurelia in the very familiar yellow silks is out there by herself. You're going to see Marcia split horses. It's really going to be ding-dong.
Yeah, they're going to come down to the wire and they're going to hit it together. Marcia will eventually get her nose down in this race. It's a very close finish, but you saw the trip that she got. A really good one, covered up and then coming clear. And while she was covered up early, Lady Aurelia was going a fast pace in here, and she just gets nailed on the wire. Frankie Dettori thought he won it. He was wrong. But, you know, this is what's known as a tough beat for Lady Aurelia. I think she ran a winning race here.
Frankie Dettori pushing on Lady Aurelia, but it's Marcia getting her nose down at the wire. And she's always been a very consistent turf sprinter overseas. That race was not a one-off fluke for Marcia, but Lady Aurelia gets back to the States. She does not need the lead to win, as we saw in her sparkling 2017 debut at Keeneland off a 6-month layoff against older fillies and mares coming from off the pace. I think you're going back to Lady Aurelia from a talent standpoint. It just looks like she has it in spades.
Yeah, I did take her in this race on top. I mean, there's a lot going on in here. I think it's one of those races where if you're playing multi-race wagers, you may want to spread around a little bit, but I did pick Lady Aurelia on top. I mean, I thought her last race was good. The Keeneland race you referenced off the layoff, I thought that was really good. And in between those two, she just ran a giant race in the King's Stand over in Europe. She's a real good horse, Dan.
I consider Disco Partner in this spot, but like Mike, I went with Lady Aurelia. She's probably going to be the favorite, but I love her tactical ability. She's still so lightly raced, it's scary to think that the sky could still be the limit for this extremely talented filly trained by Wesley Ward. I'll take Lady Aurelia in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. We're going to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, filly and mare sprint, filly and mare turf on Out of the Gate.
He's a really good horse, exceptionally good looking and fast.
Lord Nelson lunged to win the triple. Lord Nelson charting a course to the Breeders' Cup.
Lord Nelson, a dominating performance.
You asked, we listened. DRF Plus has more flexible subscription options. Use DRF Plus Basic for exclusive news and analysis, including our DRF Live real-time news feed. Or go deeper with DRF Pro and unlock buyers, closer looks, picks, and reports, including the DRF Daily Game Plan. DRF TV viewers get 50% off the plan of your choice. Use code DRFTV50 at checkout. Learn more about the DRF Plus subscription plans at drf.com/plus.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. Let's take a look at the field for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. We're going 7 furlongs for $1 million. It's a big field. For expanded stakes previews, visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube page. We discuss every horse in each Breeders' Cup race. The morning line favorite, deservedly so, the brilliant 3-year-old filly, the number 11, Unique Bella, 9-5 on the line for Mike Smith and Jerry Hollendorfer. We'll get to her in a moment, but there's a mare in this race that really likes Del Mar and is real consistent. Let's go back to the Rancho Bernardo handicap. Sky Diamonds. What a great claim for Bill Sparr.
Yeah, this filly she's 6 for 8 since claimed by the great Bill Sparr this year, and this is the second of her back-to-back graded stakes wins leading into the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. She's just made no mistakes for a really good trainer. She has a really nice running style. There are a lot of different things that you can do with her, and it's just, she's just a really hard horse to knock on the way into this race.
Nice outside post position, can work out another good tracking trip. We saw her outfinish Constellation, who is now under the tutelage of Bob Baffert. And this horse, I believe, a Grade 1 stakes winner at 7 furlongs, winner of the La Brea Stakes over Finley's Lucky Charm. Now, we're going to go back to Finley's Lucky Charm's most recent start, Mike. The Thoroughbred Club of America at Keeneland. Love the fact that she does something different in here. Usually, Finley's Lucky Charm, a speedball. This time, she sat from off the pace and then handles the 3-year-old filly Chalone late.
Yeah, she did sit off the pace. It was nice to see her show a new dimension, because you're right, her game up to this point had just been speed, speed, speed. She showed that she could rate, but she showed that she could rate against a much weaker field in this race, and then she outfinished him at the end. It's a different story. On Saturday, she'll be facing some tougher horses, but it's not like when you start going through her races, she doesn't fit right in here.
While she is a graded stakes winner at 7, I do wonder if it's pushing it just a little bit. I go back to that La Brea, where she was in control and she was run down late by Constellation. But the story of this race is Unique Bella, Mike, and we're going to go back to her last start, her first race off of a long layoff. Unique Bella, when she began her career, a lot of folks thought that she was the heir apparent to her then stablemate Songbird. And Unique Bella unfortunately missed the spring, major races over the spring, major races over the summer. This was just a good, solid comeback that she can build on.
Yeah, I like the way she came back. She didn't break that great. They kept her sort of out into the track early in this race, I think, to stay away from other horses, to try and keep her from getting too headstrong. But you saw her win very easily at the end. She never got down to serious business in there. She's just the kind of filly, if you saw her earlier races before the layoff, before she missed all that time, you just wondered, how much better could she get and where would it all end for her? And you're sort of hoping now into the Breeders' Cup that she can take a step forward off the layoff.
Our colleague Brad Free mentioned in his Del Mar track tendency piece, which is on video.drf.com and the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel, somewhat of a troubling fact for Unique Bella fans like us, and that a 3-year-old filly, I believe something like 0 for 29 in a race like the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. I do think, though, that Unique Bella is a unique talent, and she's going to be my top selection in this race. I'm hoping she breaks and sits in the outer flow in sort of the second flight behind what should be a solid enough pace. I'm hoping Unique Bella takes another step forward and takes the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. Now we'll move from dirt to turf, from sprint to route, from Unique Bella to Lady Eli in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. As we take a look at the field for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, we'll see that trainer Chad Brown is very well represented. He has 3 entrants in this year's race: the number 7, Decita, the number 8, Grand Jeté, and the number 9, the remarkable Lady Eli, the morning line favorite who just missed in this race last year at 1.25 miles behind the number 10, Queen's Trust, for Frankie Dettori and Sir Michael Stout. For expanded stakes previews, visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Before we get to Lady Eli, Mike, let's talk about the prep race in New York, featuring War Flag for Shug McGahee and 2 of the Chad horses, Decita and Grand Jeté. We turn into the stretch of the Flower Bowl. This was just a very weirdly run race from start to finish.
Yeah, it was a weird race to handicap, because when you started looking at the race, you realized pretty quickly there was just no pace in the race. You didn't know who was going to be on the lead. Javier Castellano decided to try and take it with Grand Jeté. I don't know, Dan, she finishes 3rd in this race of the 3 horses coming back on Saturday. I think she's the one you want out of this race, even though she's beaten by the other two, though. She stays pretty gamely down to the end here. A mile and a quarter might have pushed her limits a little bit as well. I like her cutting back to the 8, and I think she has a lot of ability.
I agree completely. Of those three, I want Grand Jeté, that third quarter mile in 23 and change. The pace really heated up. She took a lot of pressure. She shrugged off the pace foe, and we saw her battle gamely to the wire. Her prior races in North America, all visually impressive, all from off the pace. And I think that's where she's going to be in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. Mike, we've been picking chalk in the last couple of races. You got a price for the folks in the Filly and Mare Turf.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I don't think this is going to be an easy race to take down a favorite like Lady Eli, who's just supposed to be really tough in here. But I wanted to look around a little bit for a price, and I got interested in Senga, the number 2. She's a French import for this race. We have a video of her last win, and it's a little bit of an upset for her in the French Oaks, but this is a really nice performance. She had headed into this race in really good form. They came into the French Oaks. She's a big price. She produced from behind horses at the upper stretch, and she just finishes full of run in this race, runs right by the leaders in here. This is a really strong finish, and I think it's important to note for her, she's a little dirtied up on the way to this because she totally bombed in her last race against older horses, but that was on soft ground, and this is just a filly who hates soft ground. She doesn't act on it at all. Her 2 very poor races, both over soft turf. She really wants firm. She gets firm again on Saturday. She's a big price, and I think she's better than she looks on paper.
That's a great point. Again, Europeans come over here and they excel, I think, for 3 reasons. One, a lot of times the lesser competition, especially these French fillies, they face some top competition. No disgrace against Lady Eli, Deceiver, Grand Jeté, our best horses like Warflag. 2, Lasix. They get Lasix, they move up. 3, they want firm ground. And when you look at Senga's past performances, she wants firm ground. She should get it on Saturday at Del Mar. Last couple of races subpar because it was not firm, it was soft. He's an intriguing long shot, to be sure. Now let's talk about the story of the race. Lady Eli. She's absolutely remarkable. She's fantastic. She's overcome everything. Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf winner, just missed last year by a nose. Her most recent start was at Saratoga in the Ballston Spa. She hasn't missed a beat. Here she is in those familiar teal silks. She's just going to angle to the outside, and she's going to do what Lady Eli usually does. She just runs by the front runners, and she keeps right on going. This turned back to a mile and an eighth this year from last year's mile and a quarter. I think it helps Lady Eli a lot. I love her tactical speed. I think Chad's gotten her in really good form. She's shipped and won to the West Coast in the past. Again, it's a chalky opinion in this race, but Lady Eli's my top pick. Maybe I try to get Matt Bernier's top pick in this race. Wuheda in for second. 3-year-old filly getting Lasix, getting cheek pieces for the first time. I liked her performance overseas. She missed the Queen Elizabeth II Challenge Cup with a little bit of a foot bruise, but supposedly she's training very well. Maybe I can get Lady Eli over Wuheda in the Filly and Mare Turf. JK's got a pick 4 for you on Breeders' Cup Saturday. And then Mike and I will come back and take a look at the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
Hey everybody, welcome to JK's Play of the Day. We're going to take a look at the late pick 4 on Breeders' Cup Saturday, ending with the Breeders' Cup Classic, starting with the Breeders' Cup Mile. Hopefully you hit the pick 4 on Breeders' Cup Friday. Keep in mind, we're just going to talk about the A selections here for ticket maker purposes. If you want to hear about my B horses, tune into the DRF Players podcast with myself and Pete Fornatel with a group show with Matt Bernier and his show. And then also Pete Fornatel and I will be joined with Mike Maloney on Friday morning for a little handicapping session. We'll get a little bit more in depth for some B options. But for out of the gate, we're just going to talk about the A's. We'll start with the Breeders' Cup Mile, a mile on the turf, one of the most exciting races every year. I have 3 A horses here, the 4 Lancaster Bomber, the 5 World Approval, and the 10 Ribchester. Ribchester is probably the class of this field. Although he's drawn a little bit outside, he has been racing a little bit. He's back on 2 weeks rest. I still think he's a classy type you need to make sure you're including. It's going to be the first time he's running on this type of surface with these types of turns, and you never know if he's going to love it or if he likes it at all. If he does, if it happens to move him up, he's going to be extremely tough regardless of where he's drawn. I'm going to use Ribchester in this spot. I'm also going to use World Approval. Although World Approval's last race was a little bit of a good trip down inside on a turf course, that's kind of where you want it to be that day. I still respect what World Approval has done all year. I respect the figures he's run, and I think that he's sitting on a good opportunity to be tactically placed in this race and finish well. My long shot A horse that might have caught you a little off guard is the 4 Lancaster Bomber. I always give these Euros a little bit more consideration in these spots. But if you watch the Woodbine Mile, you'll take a look down at World Approval, who is also an A horse, who got a great inside trip down on the inside, and then you'll see that World Approval on the outside was kind of struggling wide, got stopped a little bit, and still finished on well for second. He did run not too long ago, 14 days ago, at Ascot. Didn't run that well, but I think that this is more a little bit to his style, and you can tell by the way that he ran last year in the Breeders' Cup as a 2-year-old. I think he could run a lot better in this spot. So my 8 horses here are the 4, the 5, and the 10. Moving on to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, pretty straightforward here. I think Bolt d'Oro is the class of this field. I think that his figure is going to show to be possibly a little bit low, understandably so, given that the figure was suggesting that he was one of the raw figure suggested he was one of the fastest 2-year-olds we've seen in the last 25 years. I think that this is the day he's going to prove it to us. I think he's going to run big in this spot, and I don't think any of these other horses can beat him. I'm going to use a single A. You don't have to tune into anything else to hear my B horses for this race. There won't be any. Bolt d'Oro in that spot. And the Breeders' Cup Turf, I'm only using 2 as A horses. The 3 Highland Reel. It's a little bit interesting with high Oscar performance in here. I was hopeful that Highland Reel would kind of get that same wire-to-wire trip he did last time. I've got no problem with the fact that Oscar performance should clear from the outside. Highland Reel can sit right off of him and take him when he's ready. I'm also going to use Ulysses. I think Ulysses is meant for this type of race. I think he should be forwardly placed enough to not let them get too far away, and he's classy as ever with his run that he displayed in the Arc in France, and I think he'll run good in here. I only need these 2 Euros as A horses. Couple of interesting ideas as B horses we'll talk about as the week goes on. And in the Breeders' Cup Classic, I'm only going to use 2 horses here. This is normally a spot where I'd like to pick one in single, but I really just can't. I'm going to use Arrogate and Gun Runner. I think one of those 2 horses is going to win. I don't see how anyone else gets it done. I think Gun Runner is really coming into his own. Yes, he's been running at 3 mile and 1/8 races at odds on, but I think that this 1 1/4 will suit him just fine. He ran well in Dubai, ran well in the Kentucky Derby at 1 1/4, and I think Arrogate is a special horse, and I hope that the real Arrogate shows up for this race, and it should be fun as they turn for home. Those are going to be my 2 A horses in this spot. Good luck, and we'll see you next week.
Let's take a peek at the Grade 1 $1.5 million Breeders' Cup Sprint. Our coverage is presented by Castleton Lions, the home of Gio Ponti, the sire of last year's Breeders' Cup Sprint winner and the morning line favorite for the 2017 edition. That is the number 2 Dreyfong for Bob Baffert and Mike Smith. For expanded stakes previews, visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We'll get to Dreyfong in a bit, but Mike, I want to start things off with Roy H., who has been a revelation for Peter Miller since being gelded. We saw what he did at Belmont Park on Belmont Stakes weekend in the True North Handicap. Giant Buyer speed figure. Little unlucky at Del Mar early in the summer when Dreyfong, a riderless Dreyfong, sort of impeded him and forced him all the way out to the middle of the track, benefiting Ransom the Moon. Last time out, let's talk about his race. The Santa Anita Sprint Championship, a race where there wasn't a lot of running behind him.
Yeah, it felt like a lot of no-shows in this race. On the other hand, I'm not sure how much it really takes away from what Roy H. did. I mean, he just went out there for Peter Miller and ran another really good race. You know, aside from the Dreyfong incident there when that horse carried him way out in the stretch, I mean, this horse should be on a 4-race winning streak coming into the Breeders' Cup. And he just wins this race as easily as you can win a Grade 1 sprint race. It bothers me a little bit that nobody else really ran in the race, but I don't really want to hold it against this horse too much because he's just been too good lately.
With Dreyfong, Takafel, and Imperial Hint in this race, there should be some hitting up front. That could help Roy H., who's a true stalker. It also could help a big closer, and that's Mind Your Biscuits. And if you just throw out Mind Your Biscuits last race, and you'll explain to the folks why it's kind of easy to do so, you're left with one big performance after another.
Yeah, this horse, you know, he was looking an awful lot like maybe one of the best sprinters in the country all through the summer, and then they got up to Saratoga. It sort of felt like, you know, even a couple weeks before they ran the Forego, that everything wasn't going great for this horse. And then he showed up that day, just wasn't sharp at all and didn't fire. You have to find a way to get past that race if you want to bet him back in the Breeders' Cup. I'm going to give him the chance to rebound because his races before that were too good, including the Belmont Sprint Championship, which we're going to look at now. This is on his return from a really strong performance in Dubai and the Grade 1 Golden Shaheen. And look how confident ridden he is. He just walks up on the leaders here. That's a pretty good horse coming up to his outside in Awesome Slew, and he just walks away from from this horse in this stretch. This is a really good effort. If he can run something like this on Saturday, I'm not totally convinced he can do it, but if he can do it, he can win this race.
This was a huge performance, and you mentioned the Dubai Golden Shaheen. And okay, he was against weaker sprinters that day, but he did have to ship all the way across the world without his Lasix, tough outside post, and hung out in the center of the track every step of the way, and he still won easily. This horse has some talent, and he's dirtied up and could be a good price because of that debacle at Saratoga over a track he doesn't want. Dre Fong, I think, has deceptive early speed, and although post position 2 not ideal with other speeds to his outside, I still think there's a chance that he can make the top after the first quarter mile. We're going to go back to his most recent start. That was the Forgo at Saratoga, eerily reminiscent of his final prep for last year's Breeders' Cup Sprint at Saratoga, at 7 furlongs in a Grade 1, a race in which he made the lead in basically a paceless race and then just was striding home down towards the wire. He runs well fresh. He's going to have to deal with a little bit more pace heat this time around, but I kind of believe in Dre Fong. I think he's working well for Bob Baffert, and if he can dissuade Imperial Hint early, if he can dissuade Takafel early and sort of force them into chase mode, I'm going to give Dre Fong a big chance. He's my top selection in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We've got Matt Bernier on site at Del Mar. He's going to take a look at the Breeders' Cup Mile.
One of the marquee events on Breeders' Cup Saturday here at the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club is going to be the Breeders' Cup Mile, obviously contested at 1 mile over the turf course. Let's take a look at this field. I think one of the most obvious things about this race is the amount of early foot signed on. You've got a number of horses that have one way to go, most notably Heart to Heart. You know he's going to go out there and set a legitimate pace, and you have plenty of world travelers, plenty of class all over the place. Let's start off with Ribchester. Ribchester, many people believe, is the most likely winner of this race, the Breeders' Cup Mile. My concern is twofold. I think he does a little bit better over ground with a little bit of cut in it. I don't know that he loves soft ground, but I also don't know that firm is necessarily his preferred going. But the bigger concern for me is, as far as Ribchester is concerned, he's had a very, very long campaign. He's basically gone straight through since Dubai, and that was back in March. Now we're here in November. It's been a long, taxing campaign. He's obviously one of the contenders in this spot, but I'm going to fade him just simply because I think he's going to be a bit of an underlay here at what could be a price that's obviously unappetizing, but I wonder if maybe he's a little bit over the top at this point and needs a little bit of a breather. World Approval, one of our domestic hopes, his most recent start, this is in the Woodbine Mile. He was sensational, especially when you consider the fact that he's out there setting the fractions, setting legitimate fractions, and he's the only part of the pace that sticks around at the end. You're going to see a couple of other runners, including Lancaster Bomber, try to get involved down the lane. Again, Woodbine's a bit of a quirky configuration. It's a big, long one turn and a long stretch up there north of the border in Toronto. But at the same time, look, he's in raging form. It's one of those instances. They've got him back to these middle distances. He's really blossomed here for Mark Cassie and company. World Approval, you've got to view him on the short list of contenders. I'm including him, but he is not going to be my pick in this year's Breeders' Cup Mile. You can go 15 different ways in a 14-horse field. I'm going to go with an import, though. I'm going to go with a horse called Zelzal. This is a horse coming in from France. His most recent run over at Chantilly, he made a big, bold move, and it looked like he was looming. Put in his bid, and he just flattened out badly. I think a lot of that has to do with the ground. That was over soft going. That was at 7/8 of a mile. We've seen so many times these Europeans come over here, 7/8 of a mile. They can easily stretch out to a mile. And the other way around, you see some of these other horses that milers over there in Europe, they can easily get a 1 1/8 or even a 1 1/4 here in the States. The beautiful thing about Zelzal, I think with all the speed signed on, he's going to be taken back. He's going to make that one run. Short stretch here at Del Mar on the turf course. It's a little bit of a concern, but really getting back to firm ground. He's going to get firm ground. There's no question about that. You look, both of his group victories over in Europe have come over firm going. I think he's going to relish the footing here in the United States, here at Del Mar. I think Zelzal at a big number has a chance to upset the apple cart here in this year's Breeders' Cup Mile.
Let's see if Mike and I agree with Matt's take in the Breeders' Cup Mile. We'll throw up the field right now. True international flavor in this field. You've got World Approval and Lancaster Bomber coming out of the Woodbine Mile. You've got Ribchester, one of the top European milers, one of the top milers in the world on the turf. $2 million is the purse. For expanded stakes previews, you know where to go. Video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. I want to start with the morning line favorite, the Godolphin runner, Ribchester. Ribchester, 7-2. William Buick has them out. Mike, let's go back to the most recent start, the Queen Elizabeth II Stakes. This horse likes to be forward. He has an Americanized running style.
Yeah, he gets himself pretty involved in the game pretty early. Actually took over the lead pretty early in this race. He hits the front. There he is with the big noseband there. He's in the lead here, and this is, you know, sort of Ribchester. If you've seen any of his races, and he's running all the big mile races in Europe, this is him, man. Every time he hits the front, he starts drifting around. You see him start heading over towards the railhead after he makes the front. He's tired at the end here, and he just gets run over by a closer late. But this was just another good performance from a horse who's really done nothing but run good races all year long.
Made the lead a little early in this spot, and there's going to be a hot pace, you would think, in the Breeders' Cup Mile. Midnight Storm and Heart to Heart, two horses that like to throw it down. They are drawn in posts 1 and 2 respectively, and maybe Ribchester's going to use that good cruising speed to travel in 3rd and 4th. Let those horses do the dirty work and come with a late bid. He is probably the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Mile. Mike, I want your take on the Shadwell Turf Mile, a very important prep. We talked about Heart to Heart. They swing into the stretch in the Shadwell Turf Mile, and Heart to Heart, this is where he does best. He goes right to the front, and Sway Dua just nails him late. Another heartbreaking defeat for Heart to Heart as he searched for his first ever Grade 1 win.
Yeah, it looks like here he might get it too. Deep into the stretch, he is still clear on the. He's not just on the lead, he's clear past the 8th pole. They'll come down to the 16th pole. He's still there, but you can tell he's getting a little bit desperate now. Can't hold on. Tough loss for Heart to Heart. Balarox is also in this race. He's between horses there. He got a good trip, clear shot. Not good enough. I liked the performance from the winner. It just feels like, though, over in Europe, maybe he was a couple of the real top ones.
I like how you described World Approval in our expanded stakes preview. You called him a throwback, and it's right, because he's just about danced every dance, and he's only run really one subpar race this year. That's when they tried to stretch him out to the 1.25 mile Manhattan. And while he's won at 11 furlongs in the past, the Grade 1 United Nations, that field just seemed to be ripe for the pickings for a horse as talented as World Approval. He's found his niche at the mile.
Yeah, I really feel like that's what's turned everything around for him. He's been a good horse for a long time, and he got the Grade 1 you mentioned last year going longer, but he wants to go shorter. In his most recent race, his most recent 2 races, he really proved it, but we have the video of his most recent start, and this is just the 2nd time in a row at a mile where he was just a powerful winner in this race. And I know that he got sort of right up to the lead. He caught a good start in this race. He was always making the pace, always inside, and some other horses maybe had a little traffic behind him. But just look how strong he finishes in this race. The final 1/8 of a mile, he is running away from this field. Dan, I just think the Cassie operation has gotten him so good this year, and I actually feel like he's going to be pretty hard to beat on Saturday.
And the Cassie operation knows a thing or two about winning the Breeders' Cup Mile. The monstrous mare Tepin comes to mind. You're absolutely right about World Approval. He took a little bit of heat in the early portion of that race. Sure, horses like Lancaster Bomber were in behind horses turning into the stretch, but you saw when they straightened away and Lancaster Bomber got clear, he couldn't get to World Approval. He's your top selection in this race, and he is my top selection in this race. He is just gotten really, really good this season. We're going to move on to 2-year-olds. The Breeders' Cup Juvenile 2-year-old championship perhaps up for grabs, as well as the winner book favorite for the Kentucky Derby. We'll get the Juvenile next. Let's move to the stars of tomorrow with the Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Juvenile. We'll take a look at that field right now. Our Breeders' Cup Juvenile coverage is presented by Malibu Moon at Spendthrift Farm. $2 million is the purse, going 1 mile and a 16th. There's going to be a heavy favorite in this race with the number 11, Bolt D'Oro, your 9-5 morning line favorite. Corey Nakatani has the mount. For expanded stakes previews, please visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We'll get to Bolt D'Oro in a moment. Let's go to the one-turn prep race at Belmont. The prestigious Champagne. Mike, they swing into the stretch. This is a fast pace, and Firenze Fire, despite failing to change leads, really takes advantage over a game maiden in Good Magic.
Yeah, pretty good setup for this horse from off the pace. They just sort of rated him back early, and he comes strong through the stretch. He had a nice setup, but it was at least nice, in his case anyway, to see him rebound from what was a disappointing effort in the hopeful 1 start prior to this. He's now 3 for 4 on the way in. He's got to stretch out, get 2 turns. He's a nice little horse, though, and there's no reason he won't run well on Saturday. He probably has to improve. I did think that maiden Good Magic ran a pretty good second.
I agree. I think Good Magic's going to give a very good account of himself in the Juvenile for trainer Chad Brown. This is $1 million son of Curl, and again, that was only start number 2. He was close to that solid pace. You saw him fighting out to the end. I don't think the 2 turns is going to be an issue for him at all. But the story of the Juvenile is, of course, Bolt d'Oro. Mike, we're going to go back to Bolt d'Oro's very impressive performance in the front runner last time out. But a horse that caught your eye in that race as well, Solomini for Bob Baffert.
Yeah, they're both out of the same race here, and obviously Solomini, who's going to wind up finishing second. There's Bolt d'Oro on the lead. Solomini's right behind him. As the result of this race stands, Solomini's got a lot to find to go with Bolt d'Oro, who is the best 2-year-old in the country right now. And he ran a 100 Beyer speed figure for this. He runs another 100. He wins on Saturday. He's probably the most likely winner on either of the 2 cards. I'll take a small shot with Solomini against him one more time, though. Solomini looks like a horse who's going to improve with racing. I think he's going to improve with distance. He was wide on the first turn of that race, wide up the backstretch, wide on the second turn, and then he got tired in the stretch. I'm hoping he can take a little step forward.
Matt Bernier and I were discussing Solomini before we came on the air, and we think that this horse has got a bright future in the spring classics and the prep season next year if he continues to grow up and mature. Distance isn't going to be a problem, and the talent is there. But again, this is really only start number 3 for this horse. I wonder if it's too much too soon. We saw Bolt d'Oro handle him last time out in the front runner. I'm going back to him again in here. Andy Beyer, in one of the webinars that we have on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel and on video.drf.com, he said he could have given Bolt d'Oro a 113 Beyer speed figure based on that final time. That's a scary thought. It scared Andy. He made it 100. If it was close to that 113, they're not beating Bolt d'Oro in the Juvenile at a short price. But I do think Good Magic's going to give a good account of himself. Let's go to Craig Milkowski with his TimeformUS Spotlight.
Hi, this is Craig Milkowski of TimeformUS here to talk about the Breeders' Cup Sprint being run on Saturday at Del Mar. First off, we're going to look at the TimeformUS preview page, and what we see is this race has a race rating of 130, which is a really strong grade 1. I mentioned Friday when talking about the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile that a 128 was par. You don't see many races run with a 130 race rating, but this is the Breeders' Cup, so you should expect it here. We got some really strong runners in this field. First thing we're going to look at is the pace projector, and you'll notice that there are no flags saying that the race is going to favor early or that it's going to be a hot pace or anything like that. I think we're just got a good, solid, strong field of sprinters. The pace isn't going to be slow. There's no chance of that in my opinion, but I think they're not going to go crazy up front, but these are just really good horses, and I think we're going to get one where we're going to get a tight finish here. The horse we're going to start with is the winner of this race last year, Drafong. He's had a very light campaign this year. He was very good as a 3-year-old, winning the Breeders' Cup Sprint, as I mentioned, with a 126 TimeformUS speed figure. A bit stronger group this year. You can see he did come back at Del Mar where he threw his rider. I believe it was it was Mike Smith that day. He kind of ducked in at the gap and just decided he wanted to go left instead of heading down the backstretch and dump the rider. But he didn't seem to come out any worse for the wear. He went right back to Saratoga. He easily won the Grade 1 4-go with a big 129 TimeformUS speed figure. Wire to wire. There was very little speed that day. He's not going to get that today, but he set fast fractions. You can see the 142 opening quarter mile, so he can certainly lay it down when he needs to. I've seen some question whether he likes Del Mar or not. He did break his maiden. I note that at the bottom easily at Del Mar. But the surface was a little different at that time. It was certainly slower this meet, and I expect more of the same for the Breeders' Cup. But that's probably something to watch in the few days leading into Saturday. The next horse I want to talk about is Takaful. He's a very good 3-year-old. He had a smashing debut. He won his maiden race easily with a big TimeformUS speed figure that day. And his connections kind of moved him, I guess, hoping he was a Derby horse, which is certainly understandable. He tried some longer races, and just with dismal results, he would show speed and finish way back. But since they moved him back to sprinting, he's just been a monster. He romped in an allowance race. He set a very fast pace when he finished second in the Grade 1 at Saratoga. I believe that was the Alan Jerkins. Just getting nosed out by Practical Joke, who has running in the BC Dirt Mile on Friday. cut back to 6 furlongs and won, was able to beat the very fast El Deal. He just kind of sat off of him and wore him down, winning yet another grade 1. So he's certainly not going to make things easy on the defending champ Drafong. Is why I say there's definitely going to be a solid pace in this race. They're 2 very good horses, but I will be using both of them in horizontals for sure. The next horse I want to talk about is Roy H. He's the California horse who done most of his running there, though he did ship to Belmont and win. And he's a little more of a tricky read. He shipped in on Belmont Day for the Grade 2 True North. And he just destroyed the field. Ran a huge 1:30 TimeformUS speed figure that day, which was way faster than he had ever run before. But he had been winning easily coming into that race, so it wasn't a huge surprise. What makes him puzzling is the last couple races, I think they're very misleading when it comes to Roy H. if you just go from a speed figure point of view. He went in that Bing Crosby that we mentioned earlier where Drafong ducked in and dumped the rider. What I didn't mention is how much trouble he caused for the rest of the race. He kind of caused a lot of traffic woes with the other horses, including Roy H. Just kind of pushed them out wide. Just made it very uncomfortable. So even though he finished second that day, he had a low speed figure. The whole race was rated lowly. But I just kind of put a line through that. They came back in the Great San Antonio Sprint Championship, and he was able to win easily, and he got only a 121 TimeformUS speed figure that day, but you can also see the blue fractions there as low as a 99 for the opening quarter mile. That's the pace figure of the leader that day. So when you run that slow early in the race, it's almost impossible to record a fast final TimeformUS speed figure. So that 121's a little misrepresentative. He's still got a 129 you can see as his final time number. And I think this horse can run back to those 130 that likes a couple and lead. And he certainly should get enough pace. And if he's good enough, I expect him to be right there as well. The last horse we're going to talk about today is Imperial Hint. He's a horse who's kind of been touring a little bit lesser circuits in his wins, but he's just been destroying his competition. You can see he won some races at Laurel and Parks. He won the Grade 3 General George. What was impressive with him is his speed figures. He just kept improving, 123 all the way up to a 127. Then he actually was shipped to Dubai for the $1 million, it might even be $2 million now, Golden Shaheen. But something happened physically, and he had to scratch from that race and took a layoff. But he returned in July, went to Gulfstream, and just looked like his old self. He beat up on overmatched foes that day. Awesome Banner finished second. But he just looks good. He keeps winning by a lot of lengths. And then he shipped to Parks for just a minor $100,000 stakes. But again, he sat just off a slowish pace. You can see the fractions in blue, and just put away his competition, just blew him away. He's won all his races so easily, and he's actually the horse I'm going to key on in here. I respect all of these horses. I'm going to use all 4 I mentioned in horizontal bets, but I'm going to do a win bet with Imperial Hint, and I'll probably also do an exacta box with Roy H, assuming the first 2 take most of the money. So that's it for the BC Sprint. Good luck Saturday, and we're going to send it back to Dan in the studio.
$4 million is the purse for the Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Turf. Let's take a look at this field. We've got the defending champion in this race, the number 3 Highland Reel. Ryan Moore has the mount at 5-1. You've got a European horse in super sharp form, the number 5 Ulysses at 7-2. And you've got a nice supporting cast of North American-based runners led by Chad Brown's Beach Patrol, the number 12 at 4-1. For expanded stakes previews, visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Mike, we will begin with Ulysses, and Ulysses comes out of the Arc de Triomphe where he faced a really tall order in the Super Filly Enable.
Yeah, Enable's been pretty tough to beat this year, and Ulysses was just another horse who couldn't do it. This is him in the Arc. He got a really good trip. They just basically followed Enable all the way around the track. They tried to take their shot in the stretch. he is no match for her. He gets left behind. He gets out finished for second. He's a good horse, Dan, and I think in a lot of ways he might be the horse to beat in here. He has a nice running style. He tends to get good trips in his races. All these things are things to like about him. I'd be a little worried that he's not a true 1.5-mile horse. You know, his best races are at 1.25 miles. He's 1 for 5 at 1.5 miles, and that win in a Group 3 race last year. That's the real drawback for him, but he's clearly a good horse.
I like that race. I liked his race 2 starts back a lot better around a left-handed turf course, and I wonder if he kind of excels over that configuration. That's what he's going to get at Del Mar. He does have a strong finish. The pace should be honest. You've got Oscar Performance out there, and of course you've got the defending champion Highland Reel, who just blitzkrieged this field on the lead last time out. But Mike, as we go back 3 starts for Highland Reel, we see that he is just as effective from slightly off of the pace. I loved everything about this performance.
This is a tremendous performance. To me, if he can run this race, he's just going to win right back on Saturday. You're right, he didn't go right to the front here. He sort of battled it, though. Coming down the outside, that's Ulysses again with the noseband. He's got all the momentum. He looks like he's going by right here, right? Absolutely not. Highland Reel digs in and turns him away. This was a really, really strong performance. It's also the last time he was on firm ground.
And that's the same angle you pointed out with Senga a little bit earlier on. Highland Reel really loves to hear his feet rattle on firm turf. That's what he got last year at Santa Anita. That's what he's hoping to get this year at Del Mar. His 2 races after the performance we just saw were on less than firm ground, and he just doesn't have that same ability on that going. Expect another big performance. You know I am Beach Patrol's biggest fan. Even I was stunned by this performance, the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, where Beach Patrol's the kind of horse, he wins some photos, he loses some photos, he tries very hard. He doesn't make it a photo here. He runs away and hides. The fastest race of his career, his first race ever at 1.5 miles. Where did this race come from?
I don't know, but if he can run it again, he's going to be a handful on Saturday. This is a really, really strong effort, and I was as surprised as you were. Not surprised that he won this race, just surprised at the way that he did it at 1.5 miles. He's going to be tough if he can repeat that race on Saturday.
He's a little toughy. He wants to sink his teeth into you and just shake you around like this and then finish you off. Now, whether he can do it against some big boys like Highland Reel and Ulysses, we'll find out. And it's worth noting, there was some give in that ground in the Joe Hirsch. It was not a completely firm turf course, but I just love this horse's try. I love his tactical speed. I'm going to go back to Beach Patrol in the Breeders' Cup turf. It's getting time for the big one, the Breeders' Cup Classic. We've got Matt Bernier on site. Here's his opinion.
The big one here, Breeders' Cup weekend, the Breeders' Cup Classic. It's going to be the last race on Saturday afternoon. Let's take a look at the field. Everybody knows you've got the main contenders in this spot. It's Arrowgate, it's Collected, it's Gun Runner, and maybe it's one of the 3-year-olds, most notably West Coast for Bob Baffert. Let's start off with the big one, Arrowgate. His most recent run came here in the Pacific Classic. Obviously, he was defeated by his uncoupled stablemate Collected, but the interesting thing is we know what Arrowgate's capable of. His absolute best race is going to win here. There's no question about it, no doubt about it. 1.25 miles is his trip. The question is he right, and does he truly love this Del Mar surface? We know who does love the Del Mar surface. That is Collected. Collected is a horse. He's unbeaten on fast going, fast dirt. 1.25 miles, not a problem. Del Mar, not a problem. He should work at a very, very nice trip. I think Martin Garcia has plenty of options from the outside. Do you press Gun Runner, or do you just take the initiative and go on with this and make Gun Runner come and catch you? We talk about Gun Runner. Gun Runner's most recent run in the Woodward up at Saratoga was nothing short of fantastic. He earned a giant Beyer speed figure. The question about Gun Runner is a couple things. The company that he's been facing, the fields overall, not nearly as impressive as some of the horses that these other runners have been going against. And kind of the elephant in the room, does he really want 10 furlongs? Does he want to go 1.25 miles? His record of 0 for 3 at 1.25 miles is a bit of a concern. I understand it's been on some of the biggest stages, but at the end of the day, facts are facts. He is 0 for 3 at the distance. We'll find out if he can take a step forward and get the job done here and turn the tables on the likes of Arrowgate and the other contemporaries in this spot. The 3-year-olds we'll quickly touch on. You've got West Coast in here for Baffert. He looks like he could be the one that upsets this whole thing if there is going to be a 3-year-old that gets the job done. I like Pavel. I think Pavel's a very, very talented horse. The problem is, I feel like this is a little bit too much too soon. He's only run 4 times in his career. He tried the Jockey Club Gold Cup to no avail. I do think he's a nice one. Keep an eye on going forward. I think this is a little bit too much too soon for him this Saturday afternoon. When push comes to shove, for me, I look at it and say there's one horse in this race that I really don't have any questions about. The 1.25 miles, not a problem. Del Mar, not a problem. As far as his overall tactical ability, not a problem. I like Collected. I think Collected's going to get the job done here in the Breeders' Cup Classic for Bob Baffert, Martin Garcia. That outside post, I think, is a blessing in this spot. You can either go on with it if you want, if you break alertly and maybe Gunrunner gets pinched back or something unforeseen happens. And if Gunrunner and Florent Giroux are intent on going, you know that Collected can sit just off. He's unbeaten on fast dirt. I'm going to give a look to Collected. Collected over Arrogate for me in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Time for the big one, the $6 million Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Classic. Let's take a look at this field. For expanded stakes previews of the Breeders' Cup Classic for all the Breeders' Cup races all weekend long, they're up. Video.drf.com, the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. You've got the 2016 Breeders' Cup Classic winner in this race, the #1 Arrogate, the 2-1 second choice in this field. Gunrunner is your 9-5 favorite. After Arrogate stubbed his toe in the San Diego Mike Beer, Gunrunner sort of assumed the mantle as the best horse in North America. He's the deserving favorite, I believe, in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but the story of this race is Arrogate. So good in Dubai. He's come back somewhat subpar. Let's go back to the Pacific Classic. At 1.25 miles, at Del Mar. That's Collected on the lead. Arrogate wheels to the outside. He never seems like he's going to get this horse.
Yeah, he never did. I mean, it's not like he got too far away early either, Dan. I mean, he was sort of in range the entire way, but just felt like he was always working hard to keep his position. He's kind of grinding away here at the end, but this isn't the Arrogate of old. The Arrogate of old would have ran right over this horse on the stretch. He couldn't do it. It's the second time in a row. The first time he was really disappointing. This time he was just a little more disappointing. It's a big question in this race whether you think he can get back to his good form. If he gets back to his good form, he wins. I'm a little dubious about him.
Point blank, your opinion. Will he get back to his best form? Will we see the Arrogate of old? Because the Arrogate of old wins this classic.
Yeah, the Arrogate of old does win this classic. I say no.
Let's talk about the horse that if Arrogate does not run his best race is the horse to beat, and that's Gunrunner, who has taken on Arrogate twice before, the Arrogate of old. In the Travers, he couldn't get close. In the Dubai World Cup, he got closer, but perhaps only because Arrogate had a miserable trip. Right. He's come back from Dubai. He's blossomed at 9 furlongs. He'll have to go 10 in the Classic, but let's go back to his most recent race. He dominated it up at Saratoga. It didn't matter if it was the Whitney. It didn't matter if it was the Woodward. It was Gunrunner, and forget the rest.
Yeah, they're not great fields, but he's just crushing these horses. This was a wild performance here. I mean, this was a really impressive run through the stretch for this horse. 10 furlongs is the big question. I mean, is he as good at 10 as he is at 9? And so far he hasn't been, but it's very few chances. Obviously, if he can run a race like this or like his Whitney, he's a handful on Saturday. I don't know that I'm totally sold on him as a 10 furlong horse, Dan. To me, this Breeders' Cup Classic is more spectacle than wagering opportunity. I put him on top. I'm still kind of rooting for Arrogate, but this horse is going to be very tough on Saturday.
It's an overused term in horse racing, but he has a high cruising speed. You can put him on the lead. That's where the TimeformUS pace projector has him. You can have him sitting in the clear on the outside, and he isn't going to lose any ground, and he isn't going to lose any of his effectiveness. My selection in this race, I think, is one of the most underrated and underappreciated horses in the country. We already saw him in the Pacific Classic, and I believe that day Collected beat Arrogate on the square, at the distance, at the track of the Breeders' Cup Classic. I understand anyone saying, let's prove it to me again, but it's not like he's going to be some short-priced favorite. He'll be a square price. He'll be close to the pace. This horse is 7 for 7 lifetime on fast dirt tracks. He is no bum. Bob Baffert said after the Pacific Classic he was disappointed, even though he won the race. He was disappointed that the big horse lost, and he pretty much said, when you make a mistake with a horse like Collected, when you don't run a complete race, this horse will make you pay. We'll see if Arrogate is the Arrogate of old. We'll see if Gunrunner wants to go 9 furlongs. They can't make mistakes against Collected. He'll be my top selection in the Breeders' Cup Classic. You're going to want to follow Daily Racing Form all weekend long as we head up to the Breeders' Cup Classic. All the news, all the notes on DRF.com, at DRF Video, at DRF Inside Post. That's what you need to follow on Twitter. For Mike Beer, Matt Bernier, all of our producers, all of our great talent out in the field, we wish you best of luck when your horses break out of the gate.